Okay. Oh yeah, we have nobody watching now. Yeah, that's what happens when I make people wait. Hmm. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so we do have people watching. Okay, I'm sorry for the time confusion. When I had first set up the broadcast for this video, I had a different time setting than Eastern time, which is where I'm at. So it's been interesting. But anyhow, we're here. We're ready to go.
Yeah, wait, he's alive. He's alive. Yeah, wait, look. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Yahweh.
Okay. Again, apologies for any of you all that had to wait. There was some technical difficulties, and then my youngest is not asleep. So if at all during this recording, if you're watching, whether live or otherwise, if you hear a screaming child in the background, apologies on that. Okay, so I did not bring a guest on for tonight. I am open-minded to the possibility of the Spirit allowing me to invite a specific person or other. There is two individuals that I may, if the Spirit tells me to, let them in during the video. But the reason why I didn't invite a guest for tonight is because I didn't want to bulldoze. I love having conversations with somebody else, and there's back and forth and a lot of different perspectives and things. I really enjoy that. I would prefer for you guys to have two people to listen to and hear from rather than just seeing me with this green screen background. But I have a lot of information, and I really don't want to bulldoze. I don't want to bring on a guest and then not let them talk because I have so much to bring into this topic. In fact, a lot of what I wanted to bring in tonight, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to cram in, which is why I wanted to start early. I'm going to try to heed the Spirit on what to share and what not to share, and there's probably going to be a lot of details that don't come in, just like the last video. I don't know if you guys listened to the last video I did with Vicky last week, but we had pages of notes, each of us, and we didn't share much of the details that we wanted to get into. And I think one of the reasons is because some of those details I was going to bring in are going to be talked about in these future videos, like tonight and next week, and I don't know about after that. I just know what tonight's discussion is, and I know what next week's discussion is. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be going over a topic that I have done a video on before 4 years ago on Facebook, and I listened to that video today to glean some notes. I was expecting it to be simplistic, deep for me then, but simplistic now. So I thought maybe there'd be a few good notes in there, but instead, after laughing at myself about some immaturity that was present 4 years ago during that video, that is, I do not believe is the case now. Other than laughing at myself about that, there was a lot of depth in that video. So I took as many notes as I could from that video, which ended up being about three and a half pages worth. I don't know how much of that we're going to get into. So anybody who wants to do this study on their own after the video and look at what you are seeing in the scriptures for yourself, the scriptures I would suggest starting for a topic like this for this study would be 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, Romans chapter 12, Ephesians chapter 4, a little bit of Matthew 13, a little bit of Matthew 25, and a little bit of 1 Corinthians 7. Those would be, I believe, good jumping start points. I would definitely start with 1 Corinthians 12 and 14, and then go to Romans 12, and then the other ones as you feel led as you're doing your study. And by all means, if you go do your own study on those topics or you have input, I'd love to see it in the chat, but I'd also love to see it in the comments. And that's one of the things I'm going to actually be bringing up in this video tonight is I would love feedback in the chat as well as in the comments. And last week I didn't necessarily acknowledge and respond to every comment that was in the chat because I was in the discussion, but I was paying attention and I saw some things that were pretty interesting. But I want feedback. I want iron sharpening iron. I want to hear what you guys gained from it, what you, if you can do it lovingly, what you may disagree with, what you see differently, sharing your experiences. I want to know if you got something out of it. I'd love to hear about that. I believe that would help me as I'm doing videos, but not just for me. Anybody you watching videos, I'd like to suggest, whoever you're watching and listening to, if there's something that you're gaining from it, I'm going to ask that you start letting them know. And maybe some of you do, and that's awesome. But I've noticed typically, and again, this isn't about numbers or anything, but I've noticed typically about 10% of people that watch a video will like it. And then like out of that 10% of that 10% will make a comment. And I understand that, you watch the video and you get something out of it and you move on, or maybe you don't want your comment to be misunderstood, or you don't want to discourage or what have you. But I think that a lot of people within the body would greatly benefit from hearing your input, whether you got something out of it or not. More so if you got something out of it, but if you didn't, maybe try to lovingly say, I appreciated how you went this route. I disagree because of this. However, I enjoyed hearing your perspective, something, that way it helps. That we're supposed to be, if you're listening in, there's a good chance that you are already a member of the body. So a way that you can contribute is by letting me know where you sit and what you're hearing, what you enjoyed, what you got out of it, what you gained. Okay, so if you tuned in to last week, you're going to be in an advantage from those who did not tune in last week. But last week, and one succinct, simple message sentence was, I believe that we are in a spiritual season where Yah is calling his people to come together, unite, work together, much like in the book of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah called for them and said, you see the distress that Jerusalem was in at that time. Why aren't we doing something about this? Let's get together and rebuild. And they started with the wall, the boundary, the border, and then started working on the gates and things like that. And then once they had the wall done, they started working on the houses within. And I believe that there is a pattern there that is very apropos to the spiritual season that we are in right now. I believe the body needs to come together, work together, unite, start putting little differences aside and communicating those and edifying one another in those, but working together as a body. I see a lot of disjointedness in the body. And lately, that's been what's been heavy on my heart, is the body needs to come together. And without getting too much into it, I would say that the recent passing of Skiba, I believe, is going to further push that as well. I believe that's going to play a role in this. Much of the body is mourning Skiba for many wonderful, great reasons. I mean, he had and still does have such an impact on the body, whether you agreed with him or disagreed with him, whether you, maybe you agreed with some of his stuff, but not all of it. That's fine. I mean, are we really going to ever agree with anybody 100% all the time on anything? Incorruptible, but whether you agreed with him generally or not, it's very hard for a member of the body who's aware of him at all to dismiss how much he's done for the body, how much he's done to glorify God and progress the kingdom of God here on earth. And I think that's one of the main reasons as to why it hurts so much. I mean, there are so many people right now talking about how they feel devastated and they never even met him, right? From those who've only watched a video or two of his, to those who were a part of his tight circle and would talk to him on the phone often and regularly, and all in between. Typically people who watch Skiba's videos, more than one or two videos, have testimonies of how his preaching and teaching affected their walk, their spiritual walk, but also their household. And then even outside of their household, they're not immediate family and their friends and their coworkers and so on and so forth. And part of that is not just because he came to the body with contributions of things that were often considered fringe or unique and maybe not always discussed in all the other circles, but also because he wore his heart on his sleeve. He was very passionate, and I saw him and still see him as the watchman on the wall that in a good way would never shut up. He just would not stop. He refused to not give it his all. And I think a lot of us feel that loss. And I think as time progresses, we're going to start as a body waking up. And this is going to be a moment that's going to be used by God to shake us to saying what we admired about Skiba's spiritual walk and what he brought to the body and what he did for God. I think Yah is going to use to shake us up and start pushing more, to be more bold like Skiba was, and to not hold back like Skiba did, and to go the extra mile to clarify where we stand and why we stand that with love like Skiba did. I could talk about this all night, but I've prayed on it, and that is not the topic for tonight, but it does have a role in this video. And also, it feels nice to let some of that out, because I too have been hurt. I was not his closest friend, but I did know him, and he did know me. And it hurt my household, and it still does. We're definitely feeling it. Okay, so now that I've said that part, 1 Corinthians 12, right? As you can see above my head here, it says rock tumbler, and we have some polished rocks over here and some puzzle pieces over here. For any of you who may not have put the pieces together as to why that would be the background and name, let me clarify real quickly here. If you've watched any of the videos that Vicky, Joy, and I have done, we've talked about puzzle pieces and how often revelations and pieces of truth that members of the body have are much like puzzle pieces. There are those who have puzzle pieces about Torah observance. There are some who have puzzle pieces about cosmology, geology, and geography, and things like this that are biblical in nature. But there's many different puzzle pieces. And what I've noticed is that a lot of circles, a lot of fellowships will have a few of these, but they will not be getting other pieces from other circles and connecting them because of disagreements. And I'm calling out and asking the body to knock it off. Okay, I fellowship with all kinds of people that I disagree with on multiple things, but we still come together and try to put these together. And that doesn't mean that we'll always come to an agreement and be able to put the pieces together to where it fits perfectly and we both walk away saying, oh man, this is amazing. But when you have true fellowship within the body and you're able to put those differences aside and still agree or discuss, even if there's an agreement or disagreement, these pieces do come together better. As long as the cornerstone, the corner piece is the Messiah, and you're building off of that, then when you come together as a community, you can get a bigger picture of the actual puzzle rather than focusing on just one piece of the puzzle, rather than focusing on just one part of the puzzle. And we've talked about before in videos about the pendulum swing and how, often people, believers in the body, will be swinging far left or far right in tendency, not always, but tendency, and how often what Yah wants of us is more central, and how the left needs to come in a little bit and the right needs to come in a little bit. Well, part of what allows that pendulum to slow down in the swinging movements is the far left and far right within the body. I'm not talking political, okay? When I say far left and far right, I'm talking the pendulum, not political parties. When you come together and try to piece pieces together, that is when you start slowing down the swing a little bit into a little less extreme, a little less legalism over here, and a little less hyper grace that's unnecessary over here. This is what I know is true from my walk. What do you have? And you come together and you try to put them together. That is what edification and fellowship and iron sharpening iron looks like to me. Yeah, love for you too, Rob. I saw you in the comments there. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to react and respond to all the comments, which is a bummer because you guys bring up some neat things in there, and I often want to stop and discuss each and every little thing and talk to you guys, which is why I love the comments in the videos afterwards, because I can go back and respond to those, and I've been trying to do that a little bit more lately. So 1 Corinthians 12, right? When we look at 1 Corinthians 12, whichever Bible version you prescribe to, which is another topic, just like calendar dates and pronunciations, that can be an issue that I don't think is a necessary issue. I'm not saying that it's not important for you to go with what you believe is true and what you believe Yah is leading you to. I'm not saying that that's not important. I'm just saying if you can't sit down with somebody and have a fellowship and have a discussion because they read from a different version, perhaps that's something to prayerfully go to the Father about and discuss with him, because that might be an unnecessary division. There is a difference between necessary and unnecessary division, and I think there's a lacking of discernment on that topic of whether or not certain division is necessary or unnecessary, because sometimes it is necessary, but sometimes it's not. Okay, so going to 1 Corinthians 12, I'm not going to read all these verses. This is not a Bible study where I read all the, I have a Bible study group I go to, and if you're desiring that, you can always comment in the thing here or get a hold of me if you have me on Facebook or whoever, or contact Take on the World, and we will gladly point you to many Bible study groups, or maybe you can form your own. We'll try to. I want the body to start coming together and connecting together. And I have a lot of projects in mind that I believe the Father is starting to back and support that we can start doing. Okay. I can't answer for where Take on the World views the world being in 10 years. I can't answer that for Take on the World TV. It's a large collective. This is not my Take on the World TV. I'm just a member within the crew. So I most definitely cannot answer. And I'm sure that answer might differ between the members of the crew. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 12, right? And if you're not familiar with this chapter, it's a great chapter, especially for this topic, to get familiar with. So this is Paul writing to the church of Corinth, but it's also for us now, right? And he is talking about the body of believers. And you're going to be hearing me use that phrase, that term a lot, the body, because with that picture is so much that I think is being ignored, dismissed, neglected, forgotten, what have you. That we are supposed to be a body. So what does that mean? I mean, we are given the image of a body. So when you think of an image of a body, I mean, there's a lot going on. It is one single unit with many differing members and parts that have many differing roles and purposes and gifts. I've been quoted before in videos that Take on the World of stating that your eyeballs do not have the same purpose as your feet. Thank Yah for that, because your feet can handle gravel in ways that your eyes cannot. And I want you to think about that for a second. If you've never heard me say that, or someone say that, or something similar, oh, I'm sorry somebody feels cheated. I wasn't trying to claim that this was a video about Skiba. There is a video about Skiba's memorial. If that's the video you're looking for, it will be at Take on the World TV, and that starts in an hour. I believe the link is earlier on in the chat if you scroll up. Brother Dickinson added the link in there, and that's going to be through his sub-channel there, if you will, called Enclosed Cosmology Fellowship, I believe is what they're called. But if that's the video you're looking for, I'm sorry if that's what you thought this was. That's not what this is. Anyhow, okay, so the body, right? Many differing members, many differing parts, roles, gifts, purposes, talents. That is going to be something I'm emphasizing in this video, and that's something that a lot of believers say, yeah, I know. But even though you know that, are you remembering that? Because how often do I see it that somebody sees a ministry, when you look at like Through the Black with Tom Dunn and Jared Cressman, I've seen believers say things like, what they're doing seems like they're focusing on darkness and tactics of the enemy, which I strongly disagree, but that's beside the point. The point is they see a ministry that's doing something in a way that they themselves do not feel called to do, or maybe they feel called to deliverance ministries, but they feel led by God to do it in a different manner than Through the Black. And because they cannot relate with what they're seeing, they cut it off. They assume that must not be of God, because if it was of God, they would be doing the same things I'm doing, and they would be going about it the same way I'm going about it. There is a lot of members in the body that seem to have this mentality, and I believe that it would be very beneficial for us to reconsider that. That is not what we're seeing in Scripture. That is not what we see Paul writing about in 1 Corinthians 12 and 14 and Romans 12 and Ephesians 4 and even Matthew 13 and other parts. I mean, we could really pick apart the whole Bible and find all kinds of examples of this, about how differing members of the body are called to do differing things. Or maybe you have a similar calling and vocation, but you're called to go about it in a different way, a different manner. And you're looking at 1 Corinthians 12 here, right? And Paul goes on to say, he says, there's differences of administrations within the same body. There is diversities of operations, different ways of going about it. Not just different administrations, but also different ways of going about it within the body that are being led by God. Differing gifts, right? It says one is given the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit of God. One is given a gift by faith, another a gift of healing by the same Spirit of Yah. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be led and operate in multiple differing gifts in different moments, but typically, generally speaking, there are going to be gifts and talents that are that you're going to operate in more often than others, and more often than not. Right? And I have these terms, and I can argue that they are scriptural, and I don't think I'm going to spend too much tonight arguing those things. Either you're going to be able to see it, or you can go study it, or you're going to disagree. It is what it is. But the terms are like gifts and talents, and then offices. And this is something I don't see spoken of often. I'm not saying that it's not spoken of often, but I don't see it often. There are spiritual offices, like you would have a shepherd or a pastor, right? A preacher, a minister, or a teacher, and I've got some books that I'm going to bring up that even list some things that you don't see listed. I mean, people are familiar with, the 5-finger fold, right? The apostle and the teacher and the preacher and the prophet and the evangelist, right? But there are those who would even argue that you can add to that list scripturally, talking about those who are meant to give more than other members of the body. And you can see that because they are actually supplied by the Father to be able to do that more so than other members of the body, right? And there are those who encourage. That is their main calling, is to encourage. And typically, if you're led to encourage, often it's because you're seeing a lack of hope. And that's one of the things I wanted to discuss tonight. So the first thing I wanted to get in is that the body is made up of many diversifying parts with differing roles and purposes and gifts and talents. That's part one of this. We need to have that ingrained, because and that's something that I've had to learn in my walk in the past 7 to 8 years, is that you'll see members operating in gifts differently than what you've been called to, or in a different manner than you've been called to, and you start to wonder, is that really of Yah? And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. But just because it looks different doesn't necessarily mean that it's not of God. And if you're not asking Him for the discernment of that, then you could be making a wrongful assumption. And with that comes disjointedness, a lack of connection within the body, right? And again, I'm trying to encourage the body to come together, to start unifying, to start discerning what is of the body and what isn't of the body, and start putting pieces together. So if you're able to recognize and understand the significance of what I'm getting at, with there being many differing roles, the feet and the hands and things like this, then you can start to accept a little bit deeper onion layers of that. When a member of the body is going through some struggles, maybe you don't know that they're going through those struggles. Maybe they haven't confessed it to you. Maybe they haven't come out publicly stating. Maybe they're posting something that simply says, a silent prayer, or what do they call it? Unknown prayer, where they don't want to divulge the details, but they want you to pray for them on that topic. Sometimes I believe personally, and you can test this for yourself and see what the Father tells you, but it seems to me that the Father's told me that members of the body can be going through rough times like that, and it affects the rest of the body. Even people that are unaware, don't even know this person, have no connection outside of that spiritual connection, because we are one body. So I want you to think of that analogy of the body, and maybe that will paint the picture a little bit clearer of what I'm trying to say here, is that if you have an infection in one of your toes, and let's say your hand doesn't necessarily acknowledge that, right? But if you have that infection in your foot, while you're trying to heal, there is going to be an effect on how you walk. There is going to be an effect on how you carry yourself, and the rest of your body is going to have to support and acclimate and work around that, right? So the toe infection is kind of a small example, and a bigger version would be like if you have an appendage in a cast, if you have your arm or leg in a cast, you're now having to use crutches, right? So the rest of your body is having to hold that weight now. Well, imagine if that's going on within the body, but we're not recognizing it as such, because we don't know that the leg is in a cast, because we're not even connected to the leg, because the communication is lacking, because the unification is lacking. So we feel spiritually that something's off, and we feel maybe we're going through harder times, and we don't realize that part of that. And I'm not sitting here saying that we should be blaming the rest of the body, but I'm just saying if we're aware of these things, then we can start praying on these things. And if we're aware of these things, we can start looking for these things when we're talking and fellowshipping with others. When somebody else is having a struggle and they tell you about it, and you say, oh, okay, I'll pray on it. Maybe it'll hit a little bit harder if you realize, hey, that problem maybe for that individual in that family, but in a way it will affect you and the rest of the body, whether you see it or not. Because if that member of the body is struggling to bring to the table what they're led to bring to the table, then part of the body is not contributing up to speed. And there's verses that talk about this, about covering the weak members of the body, and supporting one another and edifying one another and helping one another. And often these verses are read with a physical context of, help the sick and the poor and the lame, and help your brethren and things of this nature. But we need to start thinking spiritually as well, because that's the deeper root. That is the deeper root. I'm not saying physical issues are not important, but if we are aware of acknowledging and prayerfully, spiritually being mindful of the spiritual deeper roots of these things, then we can remember, like that woman that went to, was it Elisha, and said, I have nothing, and they're going to take my husband died, and my sons are going to take them as slaves because I have no money to pay off the debt, right? That was a physical, within the matrix issue that was solved with a spiritual supernatural that was representative of what was going on spiritually, right? Go ask your neighbors, go ask your community for vessels, for help, and then come in privately, shut the doors and the windows. And what happened? The oil just kept coming, right? And if you're familiar with reading, and you're familiar with getting deeper into spiritual symbolism and representation within Scripture, then it's not going to strike you as odd when I say that oil does not necessarily just represent physical oil that was meant to provide for her household and to keep her children from being enslaved. There is a lot going on in that picture. Okay, I've got a lot of notes. I have not been going on my notes here. I prayed that the Spirit would do His thing, and I kind of figured that would happen. And okay, so spiritual offices. There might be spiritual seasons, and yes, that is a biblical thing. You can look at examples like Ecclesiastes 3. You'll see that there are times and seasons for everything, right? Well, think about this. If you've been doing your spiritual walk for, let's say, more than a year, maybe even less than a year, you'll still be able to relate to this. There are going to be seasons, lengths of periods of time within your walk where you feel more led to do this, and then all of a sudden, like a light switch, it's changed, and you feel more led to do this now. Different spiritual seasons, right? This spiritual season, I'm feeling more led to talk about healing and deliverance, and then so many months later, or what have you, all of a sudden you feel like it's more important to be discussing what is the difference between true and false salvation. What, are you able to discern your actual election and make sure of it? What does that look like? You're going to be different spiritual seasons, different things that are weighing on your heart, right? And as you go through those different spiritual seasons, you might find yourself also operating within different spiritual offices. So you can change topics and stay in the same office. You can come as a prophet discussing a topic that is so far from the next topic that you're led to discuss as a prophet. But you might also find yourself operating as a pastor type in one season or in even just one moment, and then more as an evangelist for a lot more other time. You see what I'm saying? There are spiritual. I think a lot of the body is not recognizing this. There's that desire, that fleshly desire to have a title, right? And it's not so much of a ego pride thing. It can be, but it's not always that. Sometimes it's just a simply, and Vicky Joy and I have talked about this before, an A plus B equals C. You know, we have these spiritual guideline test things. They had them at the Take on the World, and I have no problem with them. In fact, in this video, I'm going to encourage that if you haven't done one of those, go check them out. It might help you see how the Father tends to have you operate, and that's part of the message of this video tonight. But while keeping that in mind and doing those things are good, I want to just throw it out there that maybe, just maybe, don't get too hung up on the label, okay? That flesh has that desire of, okay, I'm a teacher. Okay, that makes sense, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe you are more often than not a teacher. But if you get stuck on that word and you get stuck on that spiritual office, then there might come a time when the Father, by the Spirit, leads you to operate within a different spiritual office. And if you have not already accepted that as a possibility, then it might throw you off. And you might find yourself in some discomfort at that moment, and it might be harder to heed. I'm trying to encourage so that, not that you're going to mess up the Father's plan or anything like that, but I'm wanting to share things that I've learned through experience in my walk that might make things a little bit smoother for you. Okay. So I'm gonna throw it out there. You don't get hung up on labels. Don't get hung up on titles. Maybe it fits more often than not. Maybe it fits 95% of the time, but there still might be that 5% of the time. You know, I had a couple of years, I was just on the phone actually with a member of the body that I need to connect with some more. Him and I were really going at it on the phone for a good minute. And I was like, man, we need to do this more. And we were talking about street preaching and street evangelism. And I was telling him, I said, you know, when I was first born again, the first couple of years, I was doing that a lot, you know. And then like a light switch, all of a sudden I just felt it in the spirit, like it was time for a new season. It was time for a shift. That doesn't mean that I won't go back and do that from time to time. In fact, I'm talking about going back and doing that a little bit here and there because I do miss it a little bit. But I don't feel urged to be doing mainly that like I did for those 2 years. Different spiritual season, different spiritual office. So spiritual offices, spiritual seasons, right? And keep in mind, we have the verses that talk about, you know, fruit in due season, you know, operating in that moment as you're being led, that's going to bring fruit of that season. If what I'm saying tonight is hitting you and you're like, yes, this is what I needed, I've been seeing this too, thank you for the encouragement, then that means that this is fruit in due season for you. This was meant for you to hear it. Okay. But fruit in due season also means you could have the right picture, but if it's out of season, then you're like that fig tree that looked like from afar good, right? And then Yeshua comes upon it, Yeshua, Jesus, Yahushua, however you pronounce the Messiah comes upon it and there's no fruit. It was out of season. It was before the season. It wasn't even supposed to be producing fruit at that time. And his reaction to that, there's significance there. And yes, there's representation of Jerusalem, but we can apply that to ourselves as well. We can sit there and evaluate and go to the Father and say, hey, am I out of season? Now, do I have truth that I'm pushing because you've brought this to my attention, but I'm out of season with pushing it? You see, if we're seeking guidance of the Father by his Spirit in what to say, when to say, how to say in the moments, then we're not going to have to worry about if we're in and out of season. If you are constantly making sure that you have alignment with the Father, then when he tells you, okay, we're going to get up and get out of Egypt, but beforehand, we're going to sit and have a meal first. You're not going to sit there and go, last time you pulled me out of a captive situation, we did not sit and eat first. This can't be you. You're not going to have those struggles. And when he tells you, I want you to speak this message, and as you're starting to speak the message, you realize that it feels like a different role of the body that you are not used to functioning in, you're going to be less likely to fleshly want to fight that. If you have resolved and gone to the Father already, understanding that this is a possibility, that he might use you in different offices. Yes, maybe 90% of the time you are an evangelist, but he might use you as a prophet in a specific moment. Don't get hung up on the titles and the labels. Please, please, for the sake of the body, for the sake of the glorification for the Father, do not be hung up on titles and labels and names. That is not how this works, at least as it seems to me. And if you disagree, I'm not here to fight you. I'm just asking that maybe you go to the Father and ask him for yourself. Okay. To back up how there is differing mannerisms, as I had mentioned in 1 Corinthians 12, we talked about the diversities of operations, right? And I was saying that maybe you have a similar ministry as somebody else, but they're being led in a different way, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not of God. I would argue 1 Corinthians 7 can back that up. And if you're one of those that says context, and it has to fit the context, and you don't, it has to fit that context of that chapter, then maybe you won't receive this, and that's fine. But as it seems to me, 1 Corinthians 7, when you look at like verse 7 and verse 20, Paul talks about, the proper gift of God after this manner for one and another for another. And in that context, he's talking about things like marriage and stuff like that, right? To each they're called as their own. Some are called to marriage and some are not. But I personally would argue, and I'm going to throw this out there for whoever you are that listens, maybe it's the same with like gifts and spiritual roles and spiritual offices. To each their own as you are called. To one, this manner, and to another manner. So how do we, as members of the body and as a body in general, keep from this becoming an issue? We ask for the guidance, we ask for the discernment, we ask him in the moment we see something, if we're curious, right? And maybe, just maybe, sometimes, not always, we need to put on the horse blinders. When horses race, they have blinders on. Why? So that they are not focused on those who they are racing against. Why? Because your race is not about beating somebody else to the punch. Your race is about your walk with the Father and you doing what you are called to do. And that might look different than somebody else in the same race as you. I don't know if there's another way that I can put that might be received better for some. Something also to consider, the MBTI personalities, right? I'm doing a little shift, but I promise you there's connection here. Stay with me, okay? You're probably familiar, and if not, maybe look it up when you feel led, if you got the time to look up the 16 personalities of the MBTI. It's, what was it, Jungian, right? This is the one I have. I've got the Myers-Briggs type. I got the 7th edition. This is Isabel Briggs-Meyer, right? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I like books. Maybe you like videos. But I'm if you look up the MBTI personalities, if you're not familiar with that, they'll have little tests, if you will, right? And it'll help you figure out which little thing you identify with more. So, and it'll help you understand your personality more. But further than that, it will open your eyes. At least it did for me. It opened my eyes to the understanding that other people learn differently. Other people express differently. And that is very cohesive with the message of tonight, right? Maybe a different minister, maybe a different member of the body is being led to do something very similar as you, but in a whole different way, simply because they were created to go about it in a different manner, and they were programmed by the Father with this in mind, that they are more of a visual learner. So when they bring their piece of the puzzle that you also have, they are bringing visual aid, because that's what speaks to them. That's what helps them comprehend. See, for me, I tend to be audio. Visual helps a little bit. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but typically audio. I can sit there and not face somebody, not watch a video, but listen, and I will be able to catch the words and comprehend typically better than if I was watching a visual or, and some people are hands-on, right? So my point is this: typically, not always, but typically, however you receive truth is how you are being called by the Father to share that truth. And that will, more often than not, but not always, be used to reach others who are like you, receive truths in that manner. So things are going to look a little differently in the same season, by the same members of the body, with the same spiritual office and the same spiritual gift, but a different manner. These are things that I believe we need to be mindful of and aware of. And maybe if we are thinking on these things, it'll make it a little bit smoother and easier for us to come together and to work together and to collaborate, you know? And how beautiful and amazing and awesome picture is that somebody else is being led to share this same piece that I'm feeling led to share with you in a different way, so that it reaches somebody else that if they heard it from me, for whatever reason, they're looking at the vessel or it's just not meant or what have you, but they won't receive it. Maybe they don't like guys who look like they're homeless bearded dudes. You know, it is what it is. You know, I don't necessarily always receive the same message from other vessels, and we shouldn't be hung up on the vessels, but God created us this way to do things this way. So what am I really getting at with this? You, the listener, if you are a member of the body, if you have a true spiritual, personal relationship with the Father, if you know him and he knows you, then he is calling you to work within the body. Now, I'm not going to claim to be the member of the body that can tell you what your role is. I'm willing to sit down and discuss with you and pray on things. And if you're lacking clarity or discernment on what it is what you are made to contribute, what you have to offer, I may not be the guy that has the answer. I'm willing to discuss it with you. And you should always, always, always obviously go to the Father on it. But sometimes he likes to work through his people as well. But you have something to offer. You have something to offer. Maybe you, like me, have seen other members like Skiba, right? And he was so articulate and so passionate and expressionate and had so much knowledge and passion. And, you know, I don't want you to look at members of the body like that and say, I'm not that guy. Why should I even bother? Why? Why should you even bother? Because maybe the Father wants you to reach somebody that Skiba would not be able to reach. Maybe your fruit is not going to be as abundant. Maybe you're not going to get on a stage. Maybe you're not going to make videos. I don't know. But what I do know is the Father is willing to use you and would love to use you however he has in mind and plan. I know the plans I have for you, he says, right? You have something to offer. You have something to contribute. You have your testimony, you have your experiences, but there might be things you have to offer that you're holding back on for one or multiple reasons of many possibilities. Moses said he couldn't speak well enough. But look at the role that Moshe played. The Father is going to do his will as he sees fit. You can either be a part of that and be used, or he will use somebody else. But I want you as a listener to hear me and to be encouraged and to know you can be used. Sometimes identifying personality helps with that a little bit. I think that helps with understanding how you receive things and how you might share things. Okay, that's the 16 MBTI thing. I wanted to get that in there because I think it's helpful and it's good to remember that people learn differently. Okay, I think that's integral of what we're talking about here. Right, people are receptive to different types of people. Yes, exactly. Identifying vocation and calling, which might change throughout your walk. something that I also don't hear talked about often. Your vocation, your calling might change throughout your walk. But that's not the point right now. It's not about what you've been called to do in the past, and it's not about what you may be called to do in the future. What I want to encourage you tonight, tonight, whatever you're watching this, I want to encourage you to be seeking the Father on what it is He wants to be doing through you now. Because it might differ from the past and it might differ from the future. And maybe you're saying, I have asked God, what can I be used for? I think I'm good at this and I think I'm good at that, and maybe I can do this, but when I pray on it, I feel like maybe He's saying it's not time for that, or no. I understand that. In fact, I just got done talking to a couple people the past week about that, about how a few months ago, almost every project I had in mind I brought to the Father, I heard Him say, no. And I was like, man, you're saying no to everything, And I had to let go, resubmit, and say, okay, maybe my mind's just not in the right place. Maybe I'm whatever you want. And I came into a season recently where He said, okay, it's go time now. Let's go. And I started bringing projects to Him, and He said, yes, let's do it. Let's do it. And some of those projects are things that if you had asked me 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even a year ago, I would have said, yeah, no, there's no way. I am not the guy that's going to offer to bring a calendar together with different calendar interpretations. That's not me, because I'm not a calendar guy. And yet, that's one of the projects I'm currently working on. Real quick, if you're not aware, I am currently working on a project of a calendar for next year that will have artwork by believer artists, differing styles. I'm going for a real interesting project here. And I'm hoping to have the art somewhat indicate what is going on in that month, according to the spiritual biblical months. And there's going to be the feast dates, but not just the feast dates, but many different interpretations of when those feast dates are. So I'm going for like 4 or 5 different interpretations of the calendar. And one of the reasons why I want this on people's walls is because I want it to remind your spirit that when you look at the calendar, you see your plans and you see what you believe the Father is leading you to do, but you're also seeing what other members of the body are being led to do and when they're being led to do it. And as Vicky Joy brought it up last week, that also gives you the opportunity to say, oh, I'm not doing Sukkot this week, but somebody else is. I hadn't thought about this before, but I'm going to pray for their Sukkot, that they get revelations, that they are realigned in their relationship with you, that they are encouraged to move forward and be bold and hold the line and glorify the Father. Strengthen the kingdom. So if you're interested in a calendar like that, stay tuned. Let me know. Write it in the comments, and comments is going to get my attention more than the chat. I'm not going to lie. After I'm done with the video, sometimes I go scroll through the chat a little bit, but in the comments, I will actually read them, all of them. If it's in the chat, I'm not necessarily going to read them. So if you're trying to get my attention on something, comments. Otherwise, if you have another way to get a hold of me, that's great too. I'm on Facebook, and there's Take on the World people that if you want to contact me, you can tell them, or vice versa. If you are able to get a hold of me, but not one of them, and you want to get a hold of one of them, I will do my best to get you in connection with whoever I can. Okay. Where was I going with this? Okay, so different calendar dates and things like that. We've got the learning differently, the different personalities, the different callings and vocations. Okay, identifying vocations and callings. Let's talk about that a little bit, shall we? Because I think that does the calendar come with fuller, okay, he said bears, but he meant beard. Fuller beards. Chad, I don't know if I can help with that. I'd love to joke about like beard anointing oils and things of this nature coming with the calendar, but I don't want anybody to get their hopes up on that, because there's no way I'm taking that on. I am only offering a calendar. That is it. However that affects you is between you and the Father. If that means you're going to get a fuller beard, then so be it. I can't promise that. I'm sorry, I had to. He's got to mess with me, and I saw it, and I had to respond there. Okay, so identifying vocations and callings. I have a bunch of notes about that, and maybe something I say tonight on this topic might be used by the Father to wake you up on or give you clarity or discernment on that. Okay, ready? So maybe get ready to take notes if this is something that you feel heavy on your heart. I did see at least one or two people in the chat saying that they feel that they are, in so many words, lacking discernment on what their calling and vocation is, what their gifts and talents are, and things like this. So a couple ways to consider on that, right? Okay, so number one, first off, a lot of, not all, but a lot of my notes tonight come from this book, and you can't even see the title. Oh yeah, look at, oh hey, can you see that? I can see it on my screen. Okay, it's called Courage and Calling. If you're not able to zoom in or look at it or pause or whatever, it's called Courage and Calling, right? Embracing Your God-Given Potential by Gordon T. Smith. And I got the revised and expanded version. Not sure what year this is, because they probably came out with multiple versions. Anyways, this was a book that I picked up and studied when I was in Bible college in 2017. And it was one of the books that I expected to not get anything out of. I was already into Skiba videos. I was already into studying Nephilim and cosmology and all kinds of fringe topics, and had been walking with the Father and hearing things and having spiritual experiences that are not commonly accepted as by God by those who go to a church at this point for 3 years. So when they suggested this book, I was like, yeah, okay, I'll read it and do the homework, but I'm not expecting to get much out of it. And God used it as a moment to hit me with the book and make me realize that I can receive things in manners and operations and from vessels I would not expect. And this book actually was quite brilliant, in my opinion. I'm not going to vouch for every word in the book. I'm not going to vouch for every statement. From what I can remember, there was portions that I strongly disagreed with. But overall, I do remember feeling that a large majority, let's just throw out a number of 80%, like 80% of the book I felt was either spot on or really, really helpful and very close to being spot on. Thank you, Doc, for the links, man. You are on it. Awesome. See, this is what I'm talking about. Body helping body, members helping members. Anyways, this book is awesome. So I'm going to be referencing some things from that book. I'm even going to give you page numbers on some of them, because when I was doing my studies earlier today, I wrote them down. So I have them for you. So if you do get the book and you are writing notes right now, that might help you save yourself time from reading the entire thing if that's not something you want to do. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, yeah, this is one of my favorite notes because I found this to be true before the book, and the book really brought this in. You guys ready? I'm going to give you 5 seconds if you're still looking for a pen and paper or notes or whatever. 5, 4, 3, I don't know why I'm doing the hand gestures. 2, 1. Okay, I gave you guys 5 seconds. If you're not ready, then you might have to rewind it. You can do that while it's live. What have you? You can pause it. By all means, I encourage that. I do it all the time with other videos. When I watch Rob Skiba videos, constantly pausing and rewinding and writing down and saying, can you really say that? You know, and then you go to find out, because I loved Skiba, but maybe I wouldn't come to the same conclusion, you know, and turns out I did come to the same conclusion more often than not. Okay. All right. Andrea, are you ready? I said I was going to start, but you did ask. Discover Your God-Given Gifts is another really good book. Okay. I don't know that book, but I'll put it up. I'm not going to vouch for this because I'm not familiar, but I will vouch for Karen that she is extremely intelligent, a woman of depth, and has much to offer the body, Karen. And so if she says that she believes this is a good book, then there's probably some good stuff in there. Okay, Andrea, are you ready? I'm gonna start whether or not I'm trying to. Okay, she's ready. Okay, I hope everybody else is too. Okay, so 2 preliminary questions to ask yourself, pay attention for, and pray on. Okay, 2 preliminary questions. Number 1, what are your talents and abilities, right? What is your unique personality and temperament? These are the 2. Okay, so what are your gifts and talents? What is your unique personality and temperament? Okay, these are the 2 things. And both of these come with differing information and subtopics that will help you more than likely discern and clarify. And yes, you can go to the Father and ask, and maybe He will give you the clear answer of these are your gifts, or this is one of your main gifts, and we want to move. But doing this, might I throw out there, will also help you understand a little bit more. Not saying that it's going to give you more understanding than God's going to give you, but this is understanding that God has given me and others. And like I said before, He likes to work through the community, and that's something I'm going to bring up a little bit later as to why that's so important. Okay, so one of the things I want to bring up on this is recognition and affirmation of the capacities. Recognition and affirmation, right? So often we may be able to sit down with a piece of paper. You might be able to sit down with a piece of paper right now and list out some things and say, okay, I think I'm good at this. Maybe I'm not good at this, but I am good at this, right? And I believe I'm good at this. And you can list those out, but sometimes self-actualization is not as accurate as we would like it to be or believe it to be. So this is why I bring up affirmation, not just recognition. You might be able to recognize your talents and gifts. You might be a person who has spent time thinking on this and observing on it and praying on it to the point where you believe, not that you've got it all down 100% and that you can't grow within, but you've got a firm idea of what God has gifted you to do and what He often does through you. Not that that won't change a little bit here and there, but you've got an idea, right? But sometimes we think we're good at something, and maybe it's not one of the top talents like we think it is, right? Have you ever been in a car with somebody and one of their favorite songs comes on the radio, or they pop in the CD or tape or whatever people do now, and they start singing, and you really want to put in earplugs? Have you ever been in that situation? Now, have you ever been in that situation where Chad's sighing? Have you ever been in that situation where you find out that that person believes they are a very talented singer and you do not agree? I'm just trying to paint a lighthearted example of how it's possible for somebody to believe that they have a talent or a gift that they don't. And why is this important, right? Why would you discourage? I'm not saying to discourage, but I'm just saying, if I try to take Amber Plaster's role and join her and get on the stage and singing, and I really enjoy singing, this is what I want to do, but that's not what I'm being led to do or called to do, and that's not one of my main gifts, then I am possibly ignoring and neglecting what the Father wants to do through me. And that's a bummer, right? I know there's better ways of saying it. I'm trying to keep this family friendly and easygoing and easy to receive. Okay, so maybe it'll sound a little childish on how I say certain things. Either you like it or you don't. I'm sorry. But not to mention hurting my ears. Not only are you missing out on what the Father wants to be doing through you, and might I throw out there that if you're operating in the gifts and talents and in the seasons and the offices that the Father wants to do through you, not only are you going to gain from that, but you're going to feel satisfied and filled by that within your relationship with the Father, right? Obviously, that doesn't replace it, and that's not your ultimate fulfillment, but that is going, He says, I know the desires of your heart, right? And yes, the heart is wicked and can be deceitful, but when you have your heart cleansed and in alignment with the Father, there are natural desires of your heart that the Father put within you, because that's part of what He wants to do through you. So one of the things I would put down as your notes, if you're taking notes, in identifying your gifts and talents and possibly your roles and what you're meant to do, things that you really enjoy doing, right? Like I said with the singing, maybe that's not your top one, but it very well could be a part of what you're called to do. Typically what He calls members of the body to do, they gain from it, right? And when you're operating within the body, when your hand is actually functioning as a hand and not as a foot, man, you are bringing some things to the table. You are bringing some things to the body, because the feet are working on doing the footwork. And if you're trying to be a third foot and we're lacking a hand because of it, right? There's some issues, and maybe you can help a little bit, but how much more so if you're operating with how the Spirit's leading you within the office that you're supposed to at that current spiritual season with those gifts and talents, right? Okay, so the two preliminary questions. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there and say that it is not always necessarily pride to recognize a gift within yourself. Sometimes this is an issue within the body. You might need to hear this. In fact, I really feel like somebody in the chat right now needs to hear this. I'm not doing the prophetic thing. I'm just saying that that's how I'm feeling right now. It is not necessarily pride to recognize a gift. Let's think about this for a minute. If it is a gift by God given to you, then simply stating you believe that you have a gift isn't you saying, dun, 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 dun. It is you saying, man, God gave this to me. Glory be to the Father that I think I'm good at this because he put it within me. It is a gift, right? I don't know about you, but I don't typically feel a fleshly desire to boast about something that somebody else gave me. If somebody helps me financially, I don't feel the desire to boast and say, haha, I have money now. I didn't earn that money. I did nothing for that gift. It was given, thus a gift. So it is not necessarily pride here for you to recognize a gift that the Father has given you. There are times that the members of the body feel like that's the case, that they struggle with acknowledging and putting forth that they have a gift because they feel like it's prideful. It's not prideful. It's not necessarily prideful. I just noticed in the corner it says that I've been live for a minute. I'm assuming that means my internet's been going in and out. I'm sorry if that's the case. Apologies to you all, and kudos and stickers, metaphorical stickers, for those of you who have hung in there if this is going in and out. Making friends with atheists very easily. You hope it's a gift. You witness to them, so it must be a gift. Again, no, I'm not going to promise a cookie, Chad. We've heard you the whole time. Okay, so my computer's just been messing with me tonight, just like the time thing and everything else. It told me that I had an hour and a half to start the show, and then I turned around and turned back and it said I had 7 minutes, and I was like, and I was having troubles with the green screen and everything. Okay, but yeah, back to speak truth with love. I'm not going to necessarily say that is a gift, but I think you're on the right track, and it very well could be, right? If you feel that you are able to have easy conversation with unbelievers, and you are feeling led by the Father to witness to them, and it seems to be smooth sailing in the sense of maybe it's not as rough as you would expect for others and things like that. That sounds to me like a gift. I'm not going to say it is, but that sounds to me like a gift. I think you're on the right track. I would, if you're taking notes, highlight that for you, and go to the Father on it. And if you're able to acknowledge and identify these gifts and talents and things like that, how much more bolder are you going to be when you feel led to operate therein? Not because you're so awesome, but hey, I know, okay, this makes sense. The Father wants me to do this. You don't like acknowledging your gifts. Andrea, is it because you feel like it's a prideful thing? Let me throw out there this one here, right? And this is why, like I said, I felt it needed to be said, that it's not necessarily pride to recognize it because it was given to you. It's a gift, right? I want you to imagine, I don't know if you have children or not, Andrea, but I want you to imagine if you have children or somebody that's close to you, a friend or what have you. Let's say you put a lot of time and effort into something that you made for them, and it is a gift for them. And you believe that gift shines something wonderful that you love about that individual. Is it going to hurt a little bit if you find out that individual does not want to share that with others? And then is it going to hurt even more if that individual, you just have a dog. Okay, well, maybe hang in there with me anyways and just try to relate. How much more would it hurt then if you find out that individual hides that gift that you gave them, that gift that you made for them with your own hands, and you took time and you thought about it and you made it uniquely for them, right? How much more when you find out that not only do they hide it from others, they literally go and put it in the closet when they have friends come over to their house. And when they have family gatherings, they go put it in a room that they know nobody's going to go into. Would that hurt? How much more would it hurt if you found out that person is hiding that gift because they feel embarrassed, ashamed, or they feel like it's wrong or prideful for it to be on display. Is that going to hurt you a little bit? I mean, it's good to understand why people do it, but the reason I'm using that analogy for anybody who's not catching it, and I'm thinking you guys probably caught it, right? But the Father made this gift for us, right? When he had you in mind, when he designed you, he gave you these gifts. When he formed you in the womb, he already knew you and knew the desires of your heart, right? So any gift or talent that he has given you, he has put thought into, and he has given to you. And he gave it to you for multiple reasons, but I would argue ultimately he gave it to you to form you into the image of the Messiah for your sake, but also mostly for others. Yes, the parable of the talents. That's definitely one of the things I was going to bring up tonight. That is something that the Father uses to convict me all the time. I'm going to be a little vulnerable tonight, a little transparent tonight, which I tend to do in these videos, which is why it can be hard to get in front of the camera sometimes. Sometimes I see other members of the body with what I believe are similar gifts and similar operations, and I'm like, man, they are so much more mature in that gift. They are so much more, I don't want to use the word evolved just because of the connotations that come with that word, but they've grown in that gift and that talent and that office. And they articulate better and they're more succinct. Many of you might have picked up by now that I can just go and go and go. I will talk nonstop, right? And there's some good to that sometimes, and there's also cons to that sometimes. Sometimes it's very good to be able to succinctly, simply state one heavy sentence. There's a guy in my Bible study group that I love when he contributes because he tends to do that. He'll think about it while you're discussing things. There I am going for nonstop for like 10 minutes, and then he just throws one sentence in there. And it's like straight to the point, every word well placed and thought out and expressed. Sentiment in one sentence, boom, done, right? So there are times that I see members of the body doing these things, and I'm like, man, should I even bother? Should I even bother? There's already so many ministers that are doing videos, and there are already so many individuals that are on the stages doing these things. Why should I even bother if they're already at a capacity that I just cannot compare? You know, maybe I should just kind of hide in the corner and I'll wipe down the tables, and there's good for that too, right? But sometimes the Father will then hit me with oh, you want to hide your talents, you want to bury them, because you know that I exact usury, and mainly the sentiment there, right, is the Father is going to do as he sees fit through who he sees fit. So you're like, you know what, instead of throwing my talents out there and possibly messing something up or saying something wrong that's now on a video and is out there for as long as YouTube allows it to be out there, for people to go back and replay, and then I'm gonna have to come out again and say, oh, I didn't mean this when I said this, or I did, but I disagree now, and I have to take it back, which ministers do have to do sometimes, right? Instead of doing that, you just want to hide it and hold it in. But God is a God of profit. Profit, right? Profit. From creation to the end. I would argue personally that this is a pattern you can see. Adam and Eve, go and multiply, increase, right? And as we talked about in our Bible study, increase can be, there seems to be onion layers there of depth. It's not necessarily just referring to multiplying physically, right? And there's some really cool stuff, and I'm not going to get into that now because I'm not trying to go down rabbit trails that aren't a part of this topic. But my point is, God loves to take and multiply and take and multiply. You know, when you look at that talent parable, right? You have the one that hid it, and he comes back and he has to offer the Father exactly what the Father gave him. There was no multiplication. There was no profit. There was no interest, right? He would have been better off just putting it in the bank and throwing it into the wind of the economy and stocks and bonds, because at least then maybe something could have came of it, right? This is the picture that we're given in the context of our talents and gifts. The Father would rather you put your talents to use and ask him for the discernment and guidance. And yeah, maybe you're going to step out of line. Yeah, maybe you're going to mess up a little bit. But if you trust that the Father gave you those gifts, if you trust that the Father loves you, if you trust that he wants those gifts and talents through you to be used for his glory, and it's not about you, the vessel, and it's not about how you may be perceived or how you feel, but it's for him and his glorification. If you truly believe that, then you're going to trust that he's going to rein you in if need be. Then he's going to say, oh. You know, when I go outside with my children and I let them run amok a little bit, right? If they're in the front yard, which we don't tend to go in the front yard, but sometimes we do. We don't have a fence in the front yard. In the backyard, we do. In the front, we don't. There is a street in the front yard. If I see them running towards that street, I'm going to start calling out. But as they get closer, you're going to see me get up, and you're going to see a beard flying in the wind towards that child and grab them before they get too close to that curb, because I will stop them before. This is what it's like to trust and the loving Father, to trust that he will continue the good works in you that he has begun, right? If we're talking about your gifts and your talents being used and you contributing to the body for the glorification of the body or glorification of the Father, body too could be argued, but that's not for tonight. But ultimately, it's for the glorification of the Father, ultimately, right? If that's what you are hearing in this video and that's what you're like, yeah, I'm ready for that, then I'm hoping you've already made sure of your election. You've already made sure that you have a personal relationship with the Father. You've already have that connection. You have the indwelling. You believe that you hear from him, and the tail of the flying beard. you have that connection. Okay, well then it should not be a foreign thing for me to say to you then that you believe he's begun the good work in you, right? Well, Scripture says to trust that he will continue. He will continue those gifts and talents through you. He will guard you. He will guide you. He will direct you when need be. Right? Please do not hide your talents and gifts. If you don't know what they are, seek the Father on those to get clarity and discernment. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm sorry. I've got notes and I'm trying to use them, but like I said, I tend to rant. Either you're able to pick out the meat from it, or you're not. If not, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe move on to another show or something. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, but not really needed for right now. Yeah. Okay. Put attention to desires of heart. Could possibly be. I'm interjecting that possibly be. Could possibly be raw materials of your vocation. So something to consider for your vocation and calling. Desires of your heart, your interests, what you enjoy, as well as what you think you're good at. Oftentimes that can be connected, not necessarily always. And part of your vocation or calling might be something that you're not even considering. But this does help a little bit, right? So to give you a little bit of an idea off of what this book is stating, and I agree, but some of it I would add to, but I can only be on tonight for so long. I've already gone an hour, my goodness. Okay. Typically, prophets want words and actions to match. Okay. Typically, prophets want words and actions to match. So if you find yourself, or if you know of somebody or have seen of somebody that it rubs them wrong to the point where they want to acknowledge and confront, hopefully lovingly, and hopefully with wisdom and discernment and guidance of the Spirit, but they want to confront when somebody's words and actions do not match. That could be, at the very least, partially, possibly, a part of a prophetic vocation calling, right? And so, like we talked about before, differing offices, possibly sometimes varying offices for varying seasons. So maybe there's a season where that's really bothering you. And then just like the light switch went on, the light switch goes off after that season, it's not as big of a deal, and you've been able to pull back a little bit, and you go, yes, okay, people's words and actions don't always match, but mine don't always match as much as I think they do, and I'd like them to, and I just need to remember that. And I've got other things that the Father's putting on my heart right now. But that can signify prophetic, okay? Wanting words and actions to match. That's not always what people think of when they think of prophets. They usually think of somebody who is going to tell you about the future, right? But I mean, look at like Nathan when he went to David about Bathsheba. That wasn't necessarily so much about future as it was about now, correcting the now and making words and actions match. You are saying you are the king, and you are saying that you love the ways of God and you want to follow the ways of God, and yet some of your actions are not matching those words, and this is a problem, right? Anyways, I mean, I can go through some examples of where I see that to be true for prophets, but again, I'm trying to move along here because I have a lot to bring in tonight. Also, for anybody who's listened thus far, points to you for dealing with me this long. Hopefully you're getting a lot out of this because the Father is using this to bring it to your attention. I am expecting a part 2, and I'm not saying that because I'm an hour into it now and noticing that I still haven't done all of the notes for tonight, but coming into it, I knew that this was more than likely going to be a 2-part show, possibly 3. So the next one will probably be titled something along the lines of polished stones, precious stones, bones from meat, something like that. And it's going to be a continual of this topic of rock tumbler, which I will explain a little bit more. I didn't really explain that to you guys, did I? I explained the puzzle pieces, but not the rocks. Okay, so real quick, just to give you an idea. Rock tumbler. Why rock tumbler? Because typically you use a rock tumbler because you've gathered a bunch of rocks that are rough around the edges and unseemly to the eye. There is lacking in their presence and palpability, right? And when it comes to rocks, it's about visual, but I'm trying to relate that to spiritual walks, and within the members of the body, palpability fits a little bit more with some other things, right? Okay, so my point is, like rocks in a rock tumbler, we can be rough around the edges and lacking in presence. But when we come together as a community and allow the Father to work through each other towards each other, and we start tumbling. And I love the rock tumbler image because they say iron sharpens iron. Scripture says that, right? And that's a good picture, right? And I often show somebody pounding out iron or 2 iron swords, or you're sharpening a knife or whatever. And that imagery has a lot to it. But I really like the rock tumbler too because they're tumbling, right? And sometimes that's what it's like within fellowship and community, and even when it's led by the Father. Sometimes it's tumble and it's not necessary, right? But sometimes the Father uses the members of the body to tumble with each other. And it feels a little chaotic, a little bit sometimes, just a little bit. Passions get heated up. When it talks about Scripture, it says, people like to say, study like a Berean, right? And they look at verses like in the book of Acts where it talks about them going into the upper room and they spent all night on Shabbat or whatever, and they're coming together and they're seeing if it was so, right? Paul comes to them about this, and so-and-so comes to them about this, and they're testing. The Ephesians did a lot of testing of people's beliefs and principles and seeing if it is biblical. To be a Berean, you're seeing if it is so according to the Word of God, right? You're studying it out. I think that part of the imagery that is sometimes forgotten or missed, ignored, neglected, what have you, not received about that imagery is when they visualize Bereans, they're seeing people at night with their Bible by themselves with a notebook, and they're making notes. No throwing rocks at each other. Rocks tumbling, Patricia, not being thrown. They are contained in a rock tumbler. There's a lot to this imagery that I'm not going to go into, but I love this imagery that I was given 4 years ago for this topic. She was kidding about the rock throwing. It's her sense of humor. I know. If you can bear with me, though, you can bear with that. And that's my sense of humor. Hopefully you can discern that. Anyhow, okay, so this image of sitting by yourself and studying, and there's good to that, right? Or the image of somebody in Like sometimes I get in my mind, you'll have like the dark and dusky old school library in a church by yourself vibe. And I say dusty because, you know, you're cracking open books and you're getting into it, right? And you're studying it out like a Berean. Yes, but also might I throw out there that maybe the visual in our head should be a little bit more of a debate team. Not always, but sometimes. This is something I very much enjoy about the quote unquote Orthodox Jewish community that I sometimes, more often than not, see lacking in what is often referred to as the Christian or believer of the way, or following Yahushua, or TO, Torah observant, or whatever Hebrew roots, whatever moniker, whatever label you feel that defines the type of fellowship circles that you're within. Whatever. True believer is what I'm going to use tonight. True believer, true member of the body, right? Sometimes that rock tumbling is some serious tumbling, because you are passionate about what you believe God has led you to understand, and you care about the other person, right? And if it's of God, and if it's between true members of the body, then it is way more likely than what we tend to see on Facebook and other platforms, even here on YouTube, of people just being snarky and mean and not hearing each other out and undercutting each other and beating around the bush in arguments and understanding what they're saying, but arguing against a straw man rather than confronting what they're actually saying, because we don't have an argument against that. So we're going to argue against what we want people to view their argument as, rather than just taking what they're actually saying for what it is, right? When you have true members of the body and it's true fellowship and it's being led by the Spirit of God, how more likely then is it that we can debate and get heated and discuss it out, and it is not quiet cracking of books by yourself, but how do you not see this? This is what I see. How do you see that? And then at the end of it, you're good to go. Even if you walk away disagreeing. I don't know about you. I don't know about you, the listener. Maybe you haven't experienced that. Maybe you haven't seen that, but I have seen it, and I have been a part of it, and it's not always needed. But I love it when it is needed. The tumbling of the rocks, because when it's really good tumbling and it's of the Father, they come out. See, the green screen keeps messing me up on which side. They come out looking like this, polished and beautiful. Sharp corners are softened and polished, and colors that were not there before are now present. There's a cool little smoothness to it, right? I don't know about you. Maybe you're like me and Reynolds, and you liked rocks at some point in your life. You know, my daughter, she's tell us to come reason together. Yeah, man, reason together. Come and reason together. Taylor, yes, the Rob Skiba's tribute scheduled for 7 p.m. your time, which is probably now 9 o'clock my time. But yes, now the video you're looking for is at Take on the World TV, but under a different video. So I believe the link is above. Let me see if I can find it for you, unless somebody else beats me to it like Doc. I don't know if he's still here or not. But yeah, you're looking for, I think it's called Fellowship of Enclosed Cosmology Fellowship, ECF. And they have kind of a night to the round table type of vibe where they have many people come in and share. And I know it's up here somewhere. And you guys are silly in the chat. Pretty funny. Okay, I'm not seeing it. I know it's up there somewhere. I don't know if I scrolled past it or if I'm not able to scroll to it. Yeah, I don't see it either. If somebody could, that'd be great. If not, how I would do it is exit out of this video and go to Take on the World TV on YouTube and look for Enclosed Cosmology Fellowship. And if you see that, it should say something. It'll have a picture of Skiba on there. And you click on that. And I believe they should have been going for about almost 15 minutes now, unless they're having a late start or something like that. But they've probably started. Mrs. Crystal Zeman said they are having tech issues. I say the name like I don't know who that is. I don't know if she wants to be outed as to connection there, so I'll leave it at that. But apparently they're having tech issues. Maybe it'll be up and running here. Anyhow, okay, so rock tumbling, right? You guys got the picture, the polished stones. And there's more to the polished stones. Thank you for the link, Doc. Okay, and they are live now. Okay, so the link is there. They're live now. If that's what you're wanting to go, by all means, go for it. Go share, go listen, cry if you need to. I understand. I really enjoyed in the beginning of the video getting off my chest a little bit of what I'm feeling about Robin. That was like a very small part. So I definitely understand. And even if it wasn't that, you know, if there's something else you got to go to do, go do it. You know, maybe you'll come back and receive from this. Maybe you did receive from it. It's not my worry. I'm here to contribute, and the Father will use it as He sees fit. So by all means, you know, if you want to go see that, go see that. Anyhow, for those of you who are gonna stay, if there are some, and even if not, I gotta finish this video so that somebody can come back and see it, if not live, right? Okay. Okay. So we talked about the prophets. We talked about encouragers. They tend to see a lack of hope. If that is something that weighs heavy on your heart, typically, yes, we are called to living stones. Thank you, Samson. That was actually something I'll probably bring up in the next video because I have more to go into with that. And I have a vision from 2017 that I will be going into, Yah willing, into the next week's video, continuing this topic. We will talk about the vision and the living stones and how that connects to Rock Tumbler, as well as theology and beliefs and the building thereof and the effects thereof and works and altars spiritually and all kinds of stuff. So I got a bunch to bring into the next video. It will help to know this video before the next video. It's not necessary, but it'd be helpful. Okay, so yeah, if you see a lack of hope, if that is something that weighs heavy on your heart, where you're constantly like, man, I just want to give people hope because I know what the Father means hope. And if you don't have hope, then you've got hope deferred and you're not moving forward and you're not feeling encouraged to move forward, and then you're not feeling encouraged to do what you're supposed to do. If that's what you feel heavily on, then maybe your vocation or calling, if not for that season, but overall, generally speaking, might be encourager. Teachers tend to believe that transformation occurs through learning. I don't know if Karen's still here. But teachers tend to believe transformation occurs through learning. That is how they, in their walk, tend to feel that they were transformed, right? Often you'll see in chats, video or otherwise in chat rooms and things like that, Facebook and MeWe and all these other platforms and things, people will be talking about a specific revelation or an understanding, and they'll be using the scriptures to back it up that the Father used to help them understand that, if the Father did, right? Not always the case, but if the Father did. That's how they received it. And so that's what clicked for them. So unless the Father directly tells them otherwise and they're in tune to hearing the Father, that's more than likely how they're going to share it with others. That's what worked for them. So they're going to think that that's what's going to work for others. And it will work for others as the Father sees fit, as He allows. Even if it's through a way that you don't tend to often receive. The Father could allow you to receive it in that way, right? Father's will be done. That's something to think about. If you feel that learning doctrine and studying and learning, having somebody teach you something, and that's how you feel you learn best, and that's what transforms you, because those learning those understandings and beliefs is, you move forward from that and go, okay, well, if I believe this is true, then that means I now have to stop doing this, or I should start doing that. If that's what you like in your heart, you feel like that's the big stepping stone for you, you might be a teacher. You know, teachers love to be taught and therefore love to teach. It's how they know transformation. Okay. How they relate is how they share. What they see is needing resolve. And that's a part for vocation and calling. So for any of you that are still here, if anybody is still here that's taking notes on trying to figure out vocations and callings and gifts and talents, one of the big things I would highlight and write out real simply is, how do you relate to things? Something to ask for yourself over time and to think about and to pray on. How do you often want to share with others? What clicks for you, right? What do you see needing resolve? What do you see lacking and needing fixing, right? maybe you see all kinds of issues and you're like, oh, how can I be all these different things? But maybe identifying those issues and bringing it into the attention of the body as part of your calling. A watchman sees the issues coming ahead and warns the body. The watchman does not necessarily have the answers as to what to do about it. A watchman might not know what to do, where to go with it. The watchman just knows, hey, there's stuff coming this way. You guys need to know. I don't know what we're going to do about this, but there's stuff coming. That might be a watchman calling. And that doesn't mean that you won't also have some answers on how to go about things. You have to understand, again, this is why I say don't be stuck on labels and terminology and words and little boxes. It's good to have an idea, but don't get hung up on that. Okay, because you might be partially this and partially that. Might be a preacher prophet rather than one or the other, right? As well as different seasons and stuff. You're saying my name, Karina, but I don't know what you're. Every one of them, body as it has pleased him. Yeah, and that's one of the cool things too to think about is, the Father designed this in a way that pleases him. Again, not wanting to emphasize, do not hide your talents. Go to him and ask him for discernment so you can walk therein, because that pleases the Father. He wants to see you doing what he designed you to do. Stop holding back. Stop doubting and having fear on these things, please. It's okay to ask other members of the body to pray for you on these things. It's okay to ask other members of the body what they think might be your gifts and talents and callings and vocations. I'm not saying to take their word for it and say, okay, I've got 5 out of 5 people are all saying you are most definitely a pastor. I must be a pastor. I'm not saying do that, but it is good to hear from the community, which is another one of my points. And I would argue Romans 12 does a really good job of painting that picture, that Paul wants us to identify why we are in the context of community, who we are in the body, in the context of community, okay? This was something that hit me hard in 2017. I don't know about you, but me, personally, it is very easy for me to be separated. And you say, oh yeah, holy, kadosh, set apart. I mean from even the body. And it's not a I know better or you have nothing to offer me or anything like that. I mean, sometimes it's I don't think I have to offer you. That is sometimes the case. But usually, typically, it's just I'm very, back to the 16 personalities, I am an INTJ typically, right? For those of you who know, that fits me pretty well. Yes, not all teachers speak publicly. These are all good points. These are all good points. You guys are bringing up great points in the chat. These are things to consider. And this is why I said, you might have the same gifts and talents and vocation and calling and spiritual office as somebody else. You might be able to all click the same boxes and still be operating within differently. And please do not compare yourself to others in the sense of looking at their basket seems to have more fruit. Okay, because you don't even know. Maybe the bottom of their fruit basket is rotten. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is full and abundant, but that does not horse blinder. That's not about you and your walk. Okay, if you're going to look at others, which is fine, look at it and okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because I do have comments I'm going to get into, so I'm just going to go with it because I do have some things to say about that. Okay, so Paul wants us to identify who we are in the body in the context of community. And you cannot do that without community. And that's what I was saying is I have the personality type, and I tend to be the type of person that sometimes if I don't get nudged by the members and by the Spirit, I will be secluded, be a homebody, and will keep my revelations to myself. There is still a lot of things that I have not shared with the body. In 2018 and 2019, Chad, I don't know if he's still here or not, but Chad might be able to vouch for this. I don't know if he remembers me telling him this, but I had a real convicting moment with Chad and a couple other people on one-on-one discussions. And I was to the point of breaking down in tears, like a fireside chat at Take on the World. Amongst all this beautiful fellowship with believers, I almost broke down because it was hitting me so hard that, man, I have so much, not that I have so much to offer, but I have not been offering what I do have to offer often. And that's not a good thing, you know. And I have reasons as to why certain things are harder to share. And if you're not able to relate to certain things, they might not be received in a way that I would like them to be received, but that's not the point. It's not about what I want. It's about what the Father wants. So I've been learning over the years, and I'm much better at it now than I was then. There are still some cards that I've been holding close to my chest, but I believe that I'm going to have to put them down the road. And there is a couple of them I'm not looking forward to. There's a couple of them that I can't wait with great relief when it's time, but it still has me nerve-wracking because I'm like, man, there are some cards I do not want to lay down yet, at least. But when it's time, right? So my point is, in 2017 is when I first got hit with this. I was at Bible college, and one of the things that they kept emphasizing is community, community, and community. And when I was first born again, I was like, yeah, let's go to the churches and stuff. And I kept getting kicked out of churches, and I kept getting kicked out of Bible studies, and kept getting hurt, by those who identify as believers. And some of them might have been true believers, and I think some of them were not. But that is beside the point. My point is that I try to put myself out there in community, and in a lot of ways it was like, well, this is not working, so, right? Which is easy for my personality to say. Even close friends, it's easy for me to say, you know what, I can take a break. I can spend time with me and the Father and focusing on my family and my role as a father and a husband and my job and providing for my family. Yeah, that's easy for me to focus in on that and leave everything else be. Not saying that it's easy for me to be amazing at those things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm the perfect husband or father or anything like that. I'm just saying it's easy for me to shut others out. That's all I'm trying to get at. And so what hit me hard in 2017 is that you are going to struggle with identifying who you are as a member of the body in the context of community without community. And I believe this is a highlighter moment. Get out the highlighters if you're taking your notes, if you do highlighters, or maybe write a little asterisk or star or something like that. That's what I do, or underline it, or big letters. Okay, this is another big note for anybody, if anybody else is still taking notes, if I still have you around, right? You can't find out fully your role within the body outside of the body. You need the community, okay? And this is why input is so significant. Remember earlier in the video, if you were here with me, I said I love comments under the video. And if you don't have something nice or warming to say, or to say, that you enjoyed it or something that you gained, by all means, if you feel like you got to put it in there, put it in there. I ask that you do it lovingly. If you're going to come in there and say, man, I just feel like you are, wrong about everything. if that's what you feel, I'll read the comment and I'll prayerfully consider it and I'll hear you out. And the better you are at keeping it not emotional, the easier it'll be for me to receive those things. And if you're actually trying to help me, something to consider. If you're picking your nose. Well, Chad, was it apropos though? Were you picking your nose when you thought you heard that? Because maybe that's what you needed to hear. Maybe the Father wanted you to hear that you were picking your nose and to get your highlighter out. I don't know, Chad. Sorry if my volume's going out. Here, let me take a drink. Maybe I'll try to wrap this up. Yeah. I think most of us would prefer kind criticism. But either way, I'll take even the not so kind criticism. It's good to take the criticism and let it become your coach. Go to the Father and say, hey, so and so is saying this. Is there any truth to that at all? Even if not how they saw it. Maybe it wasn't just an attack of the enemy, but something the Father can use for you. Maybe it was an attack of the enemy, but the Father could still say, well, hey, that's actually not a main issue. But if you're in the right part of your walk, in the right season and things, that person was not right in saying that for that moment. However, in other times, you do struggle with this sometimes. And this is for growing in your walk, right? Okay, so input, comments, conversations, likes and subscribing, whatever. I mean, that does help to show if we feel that people are enjoying and gaining from it, but that's not really an issue in terms of like numbers and things. I'm not worried about that, which is another thing back to the fruit basket. If you feel like you have 5 apples in your fruit basket and you're looking at a Skiba type who has millions, of fruits in his basket, instead of sitting there and feeling like your basket's kind of tiny compared to the others and therefore less significant, I'm here to tell you, as it seems to me, it's not about the abundance, but rather, are you where you're supposed to be in your relationship with the Father and doing what He has called you to do? Doesn't the scripture say something like, the last will be first, and the least shall be the greatest? All I'm saying is, if you have 5 apples, and by 5 apples in your mind, it's because you have a small group that you feel led to work on, and you don't have large stadiums, and you don't have millions of followers or whatever, if you're a teacher or a preacher, right? Or if you're an street evangelist, and you know some people who get large crowds, and you tend to get small, intimate one-on-ones. It's not about comparing those type of apples to apples or oranges or whatever. It's not about that, right? Because if you have 5, if that's what you're counting as 5 apples, then maybe you are reaching those apples with depth and intimacy and closeness in a way that you would not be able to reach a large group, because the diversity and not being able to give in time. When you were in school, was it not easier to receive from a teacher when the classroom was less students, right? A more intimate. One of the things that often, not always, often people say about colleges, that they enjoyed about going to college, was that the classrooms were sometimes smaller and therefore allowed a more intimate environment, thus allowing you to conversate with the teacher more. How many of you might really, really appreciate more so a time with a speaker at Take on the World with a small classroom that has a limit of individuals rather than the main stage? Not saying that both don't have their benefits, they do. But how many of you might actually want to be a part of that small, because then you can actually ask questions, and maybe you can ask questions to the other ones, but there's less of a chance that you get your question answered or whatever, or maybe you have follow-up questions, and that speaker is not going to sit there and talk to just you the whole time because they've got 500 people instead of 5, right? So when you're comparing to other members of the body, I actually have a note on this, and I've got so many notes I didn't go over. Let me see where we're at here. Okay. When you reject prideful comparisons to others, it allows us to accept ourselves and our calling and our vocation. So letting go of that allows you to better receive where you're at and what you're called to do, which then allows you to receive better what others are called to do. Because it no longer then matters if it looks like yours or not, because you are where you're supposed to be. And now you can appreciate what somebody else is doing differently because, oh, that's really neat. So-and-so's doing that. That is so cool. And they have that gift, and they're reaching people. Man, God is amazing. It's a lot easier to have that in your heart and not just say it when you feel comfortable with where you're at with the Father and doing what you feel led to do. We're talking about hangnails and picking noses and somehow actually lining it up with the message. You guys are something. Okay. Yeah, I'm not combing my beard. But now that you say it, I kind of want to. I have a note on this. I do. I have many notes. But Karen, I feel like you can relate to that. Okay. Chad, are you amening to the... Okay. Anyways, so when you're able to receive where you're at and you feel like you're in alignment with the Father, with your calling and your vocation and your gifts and your talents, and you are identifying that and you are discerning it and you are good to go with what He's calling you to do, and you're not comparing it to the person to the left or the right and comparing how many people that they are being used to seemingly or truthfully, either way, affect others. When you're not hung up on that, you're able to accept others. And in vocation, we are augmented by others rather than threatened by them. Right? Okay. Highlighter moment. I'm going to be a little bit all over the place, I think, because I've got so many notes I want to go over, and I'm already further along, taking longer than I expected, and I don't know how long you all would really want to listen to me about this. Okay, but highlighter if you've got them, if you're going to use them. Notes if you got them. Okay, you guys ready? Something that might help you discern vocation, gifts, talents, callings, right, is not just something that you enjoy, not just something that you think maybe you're good at, not just something that when you do, you get satisfaction out of, but also, and also where you see lack, right? I think that's a big one where you, and I mentioned that in the last video, where you see problems and you're like, man, we got to do something about that, right? But furthermore, this next note is something you feel you have to do. You just have to. At this point, it does not matter about the others who have the basket of 1,000 fruit and you've got one. It doesn't even matter anymore because you still feel you have to. You've got that urging, that intense feeling within you, and you just have to do it. You have to. I would say personally, there's a good chance that that is part of your vocation and calling. And when you look at how the Father guides you in those moments, that might be, depending, an indication of spiritual office, spiritual season, for sure, but possibly spiritual office, at least for the season, but possibly more often than not, if you see patterns and you can look back and say yes, but also gifts and talents, right? And this is two-dimensional, right? And this is a point I wanted to bring up. Oh no, Patricia's going to take off. She's probably going to have to rewind or miss it, whatever. I don't know if I can wait long enough. I've had to wait for Patricia going to the bathroom before, not in a video, but at the coat. And see, I can say that right now because she's not here. Oh, apparently she is. Yeah, and you know, there was a factor of wolves and things. Did you come back already? Are you still waiting? Are you squiggling in your chair? Because I don't know. I might go on for more than a couple minutes here. All right. Well, she's not going to respond. I have to do gifting. Okay. Well, with that note, you go do that gifting, and I'm going to continue on then. I was going to wait, but I'm not going to wait. Okay. So two-dimensional, something to write down for your notes if you're taking them. Highlight it, asterisk, stars, whatever you do. Two-dimensional, internal desire, as we've mentioned and talked about, right? But also community tells you that God has used you to help them in that way. And this is something I really wanted to bring up tonight. And this is something that I feel is really important. This has to do with, I got it right this time, rock tumbling and polishing. Not so much in debates, but iron sharpening iron, edification through the community, from the community, right? She might have to look what up. Did I use, oh, squiggling. Okay. You guys are silly tonight. For anybody who's not familiar with this video, with me doing videos and with this, the individuals in the chat and stuff like that, that's just this. We know each other pretty well. So there's going to be some closeness and comfortability. Okay, yeah, sorry, Chet. Okay, keep going. I know. He's like, man, you've been on this forever. Community tells you how they helped you, right? This is one of the reasons why I brought up comments. And this is why I encourage you to do that for others, not just me. Yes, I want to hear your comments. Please put comments under the video and tell me if you gained from it. And if so, what? I mean, it's great when somebody says, I really enjoyed your video. I gained from it, period, the end. I enjoy that. But if you can tell me how, and maybe you don't want to go too personal, that's great. But if you can tell me what it is about how I went about things or what I said or what clicked for you and a little bit of maybe why, I would love that. I would love that. Even if I don't, for some reason, like your thing and respond, which I'm going to try to do. But if I don't respond, know that I appreciate that. And I probably read it and got a lot out of that. But this is why I mentioned earlier that if you want to know who you are and the member of the body, you need to do so within the community. Okay. And I want you to think now, right? Because I bet many of you, there's some bells that are going to start ringing in like 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. How many times have you been to a fellowship, bonfire, barbecue, church, take on the world type of events, conferences, conventions, seminars, right? Just hanging out with friends and family that are Bible studies, what have you. How many times, I want you to, and we're going to ask the Spirit right now to remind you of some moments that will be indicative and help you with your callings and gifts. If that is something on your heart right now, we're going to ask the Spirit to do that. Can you guys agree with me in the Spirit on that? We're going to ask that the Spirit uses this moment right now to use this to highlight this for you, for those of you, if you're really wanting the answer to this. I'm going to ask that the Spirit brings to your memory right now, with your agreement that you guys are not vocalizing in chat. Everybody got quiet the moment I asked for agreement. Remember that whole working in unity? Okay, there we go. At least one witness. That's good enough, right? Because we got the two. All right, so we're going to ask the Spirit of God right now to bring to your memory moments, not just one, but multiple moments where somebody has come to you and said, you know what you're really good at? You know what you did for me when you said this, or when you did this. You may not have realized it, but it had the biggest impact on me, right? When we think about the loss of Skiba, or when we think about in general conferences and conventions, and you go and you see a speaker that you've listened to before and they've affected your life, they've affected your walk. When you listen to them, when you watch them, God used them to hit you hard and speak truths into your body, and you know it's God, but you still want to hug them and thank them and say, oh, I love you, you have no idea what you've done for me, right? There have been times that you were on the other side of that, and I think you might have not realized them because maybe the person wasn't as ecstatic as you expected. Maybe you weren't a speaker at Take on the World or one of the other conferences or events or whatever. Maybe you didn't have a table dividing you where you had books and shirts and supplies and resources and things between you that you're supplying. But you were at a barbecue. You were at Sukkot. You were at church. You were at work. You were in your kitchen or in your dining room or in your living room. You were on the phone or in a virtual Bible study, in a library or in a coffee shop. And for a moment, somebody looked you in the eyes and said, I really appreciated when you said this because it helped me with this. And I think you do that often. You know that? You're good at that. You do this often. Man, when you explain things like this, other people get it too. I'm not the only one. When people say things like that to you, whatever the Spirit's reminding you of right now, if you've got things and you're like, oh yeah, you know, at the barbecue, they did say that I was really good at connecting people together. And, you know, and then so-and-so at the church said the same thing. And I do enjoy bringing in somebody who is a good resource to somebody who's lacking a resource and being the middleman. I like that. Maybe that's your calling. My past father-in-law who passed, he, I believe, was called by God to do that. That was, I think, his number one gift and talent was connecting people. He would see somebody who needed something and say, I know somebody in my phone. I know somebody from in my past, or I'm friends with somebody that could actually help you with that maybe. Let me put you two together. And he got so much enjoyment out of doing that. And he was constantly doing that. Any chance he got. And maybe sometimes the connections weren't as kismet as he thought, right? But he was good at it. And he did have resources and he did have connections. And the more he did it, the more people were like, hey, do you know somebody that could maybe help me with this? Because I know last time I was struggling with this and you brought up so-and-so. Do you know anybody that can help with this? Honestly, the whole body needs to be doing this. Honestly, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be constantly connecting each other all the time. But there are some within the body, maybe somebody listening tonight, who is called to do that. That is their calling. That is their vocation more often than not. Maybe not their whole walk, maybe not all the time, but overall, that's what they're a connector. Maybe that's your calling. Maybe that's your vocation, right? I have a book, and I don't have it next to me because that's right. I was going to leave it for next week. So if you join me the next week, I'll bring up that other book. But there is a book that I will give you a little tidbit on in case you're here tonight and you won't be there next week. That talks about these things a little bit, and was suggesting that businessmen, whether they realize it or not, are typically gifted to be good at business transactions and have financial supporting, because if they submit to the Father, Yah will use them to sponsor and support and make connections between ministries and well-needed resources. You know, when I was first born again, I remember thinking, man, businessmen, if you come to the Father, you're going to throw away your suit. You're going to give away all your money, right? Because there's verses that talk about give away everything to the poor and stuff like that. And I'm not taking away from that. Please do not think that that's what I'm doing. But if you're a businessman or businesswoman and you feel like, you know what, I'm kind of actually really good at this, and I'm kind of actually possibly probably gifted in this. Maybe the Father wants to use that gifting uh, in the body in a ministerial way that you would not have thought. Maybe because you had this disconnect of thinking, well, that's what I do for provision. And yes, I enjoy it. And yes, I'm good at it. But what does money and connecting people have to do with the body? Really? Because I know lots of ministries that need funding and connections. And I know lots of ministries that need not just money support, but like they need technology helpers. Speaking of, if you're interested, maybe I could use one of those for something. I've got a couple things in mind. I'm not going to pay you though. So, but what have you? There is need. Ministries have need for things. They need something that all of you could do, and probably do for some. Right? Waiting for Patricia to say, "You said do." Um, I know she's laughing right now. She heard that. Yeah. Um, oh man, where was I going with this now? Man, making connections, ministries and needs. Okay. Ministries need help, and something that all of you could do, and maybe you do, but if you don't, I want to bring to your mind and thought. If you enjoy a video, if there is something that you really get out of that video, right? And maybe you liked and subscribed, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you commented, and maybe you didn't. But did you share that information? Did you bring it up to others? Did you point out that ministry and resource to others so that they can go get messages similar from that ministry? Are you supporting that ministry? Because I see in the body a lack of that sometimes. I do see sharing of videos sometimes, and I'm not trying to say what like whoever you're into. It could be somebody I really strongly disagree with. Does not matter to me. My point is, for you in your walk, if you're gaining something out of it, then somebody else is probably going to gain out of it too, right? So maybe pushing that. Ministries could use that, right? When you have companies and businesses, they actually have people on payroll whose jobs are to market and advertise. And churches that have lots of money have marketing and advertising. But you know what most ministries strongly lack, especially the ones that are really genuine? Not all of them. Some of the genuine ones have really good marketing and advertising. There are some I can think of right now, but there's also some that do not. And you can tell, you can see it, right? So maybe there's a ministry that you would love to help, but you're like, man, I'm not a teacher. I am not a preacher. How can I help? I could pray for them. Yes, you can, and please do. But also, you can share their content. You can bring up information. There's even things, I used to do this. This was something I was going to do in some of my Facebook videos, talking about little things people can do. Writing little notes and leaving them in things inside of Walmart. Have you guys ever done that? Have you ever like had a little piece of paper and you wrote like a website, so-and-so at such and such on YouTube. And you put a little piece of paper and then you put it in a cup with like the lid in Walmart. And then you pray about that reaching somebody that could use that. I used to do that all the time. When the weather is good and it's not going to rain, especially if you have children, take them to a park, somewhere where there's sidewalks, get out the chalk, have them draw their rainbows and whatever, write a verse. Write whatever you feel like the Spirit brings to your mind right then and there. Yeshua is real. Seek him. Whatever is, it doesn't have to be this huge, profound thing. In fact, especially if it's going to be chalk, you probably don't want to write a paragraph, right? But I'm just saying, there are things you guys can do right now. There are things you guys can do. You don't have to be super proficient in your gifts to be utilized by the Father and actively doing things. And maybe as you go to do the chalk, you can be like, man, writing and art is not my thing. But as you're writing, you realize, but you know what is? You know what is? And then the Father makes it click. Hey, you don't have to tell me, but you don't have to give me details, but I want to know, was there anybody in the chat, anybody who was listening, who remembered at least one, if not more, moments where somebody said, you're really good at blank? Can I get a reaction on that? If it applies to you, if while I was talking about that, something just, I want to know if, because we asked the Spirit, right? I did. I'm gonna stop asking the chat of things, because that's when you guys get quiet. Okay, so we do have somebody who's saying yes. Okay, so my point is, that was one of the things I wanted to get into this video, right? Last video was talking about uniting the body, coming together, working together. Well, when you look at the wall in Nehemiah and you see the long list of all the different tribes and things, right? And it says so-and-so from such and such tribe and their children and the priests and yada, yada, yada. They went and did this wall. And then so-and-so did. You know what I didn't see in Nehemiah? There wasn't bickering of who does what. There wasn't bickering of, we don't get to see some of the discussions, but you don't see them coming in saying, okay, Nehemiah, what do you want? Where do you want me at? Which there's not necessarily something wrong with that. But my point is it possible, and I would argue likely, that when they got there, they already knew what they had to contribute? And I say that, if you hear screaming children, I'm sorry. Yeah, see, got one just today, Karen. I feel like I could throw a couple at you specifically, but I think you've already got a good idea on some things, about where you sit on gifts and talents and callings and stuff. At least I like to say generically, overly. It doesn't mean it won't differ from time to time, here and there, as the Spirit sees fit, right? Man, I know. I'm sorry, guys. I take forever. This is what happens when I don't have a guest and I don't feel bad about other people's schedules. Okay. There was something else I was talking about, but I lost it. So we'll just keep moving on. Pastoral calls tend to be fundamentally about empowering others to their respective callings. Typically, a pastor is going to ask themselves, if they have a pastoral call, they're going to ask, and some of you don't like the word pastor because of some verses, and you and I could debate that a little bit if you want, but I would say look at the word shepherd as well. It's not always negative, okay? But I'm not here to debate with you guys on things. Typically, a pastoral calling, if it's of God, the individual is going to feel led often in moments to ask the Spirit, what is it that the Spirit of God is wanting to do right here and now? What can I do to foster that? What can I do to make this environment, what can I say and do to make that so it happens? So that we can, and a pastoral call typically wants to lead the body into recognizing their gifts and talents, right? The pastors, they get on there and they have all of these different sermons about things, and they're just showing you about things that happen in the Bible, or they're telling you to repent about things, but ultimately they're trying to get you to come back into the body, be alignment in the body, so you can work within the body doing what you're called to do, because that glorifies the Father, benefits the kingdom and the body, right? Yeah, how is the Spirit of Yah at work here now? How can I help that, foster it? Okay, I want to just throw it out there. See, I told you I was going to tell you guys pages. All right, have to do vocation is page 170. The whole, you feel like you have to do it, that's page 170 of that one book. Rejecting prideful comparisons, they talk about that, and accepting yours, that's page 129. Nancy, I told you I was going to give you guys stuff and I didn't even say them. Having experience with brokenness, all have experienced brokenness, so we should not be surprised by difficulty in our calling and vocation. Oftentimes people will start working in their calling and vocation and gifting, and they'll come across troubles and say, oh, this must not be of God. I must have had it wrong. I thought I was good at this, but I'm not, because I'm having problems. Not necessarily the case, right? We're told in Scripture not to be derailed or perplexed by troubles. Something to think about. And then that book goes deeper into that in page 206. And then in 207, they reiterate that Paul says identity in Christ in troubled times is connected to being an heir with Christ in sharing suffering. I mean, that's not really a deep thing, but it was something I thought needed to be said. They were kind of talking about, this was a cool analogy, and that's in that book in page 207, around about there. They were talking about the difference between two pregnant women. One knows that they're pregnant and the other one does not somehow, right? It happens. So the pregnant woman who now understands she's pregnant, she still experiences pain like the other one. The pain does not lessen, but she is now looking forward to what is to come from that pain and suffering. When you know that you're working within your calling and vocation and your gifts and your talents, it is easier to not be derailed and perplexed and thrown off by the troubles that are coming at you when you know, and you're in alignment and you make sure, and you're going to have to continually, this is not like you get a one-time deal and then you're like, okay, I'm good from here on out. You're going to have to continually get that alignment and make sure that, okay, this is the vocation you tend to have me in, but is this for right now? You're going to have to do that. If you do that, then you know, like the pregnant woman knows, yes, you're going to go through pain, but it's about what's to come after, right? Which is a really cool picture, as I did a video about this before, about labor pains versus birthing pains, how there's verses on those two different things, and they are two different things, and often confused as one thing, and they are not. One is before the other, but we're not going to go into that right now. Also talking about hardships in that book, page 208, I would suggest 2 Corinthians, like 4 through 6. When you're looking at difficulty, like the clay jars and things like this, and the locusts and the plagues and stuff like that, when you're looking at difficulty in your walk, in your spiritual walk, in your vocation, in your calling, in your ministry, whatever you feel called to do, might I suggest you ask Yah to help you comprehend how he's going to use those troubles to shape you and how you're going to grow from it, right? And that might not be new for some of you, right? That's something we've talked about, many people have talked about before. When you see the hard times in the storm, instead of asking God to get out of it, ask him, what are you going to do with it? Well, ask him, how is he using that moment to shape you? When you go through these troublous times in your vocations and callings, and he carries you through it, if you can receive what you're supposed to receive on how he used that to shape you and mature you in your walk and in that calling, then you did just that. Your vocation is now matured more. You want to grow in your talents. Just because you have a talent or a gift, a vocation or a calling, does not mean you don't need to mature and grow within it, right? And I'm sure many of you know that, but it is something that needs to be said more than once. Okay. Here's a strong one. Page 71. 7-1 for those, if any of you get that book. When you fulfill your calling, you're doing so with faith, not with apologies. You're moving therein with a joyful acceptance. Do not feel diminished by what you don't do. Again, horse blinders, not looking at, when you look at the others, it shouldn't be about what are they doing that I'm not doing, vice versa, or whatever. It shouldn't be about that. I mean, you can look to try to gain notes and things like that and ask the Father, hey, they were doing that and that kind of worked. What do you think about us doing that? That's a cool idea. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you see that and you're like, why do I even bother? Do not feel diminished by what you do not do, because it's not about what you do not do, but rather what you are called to do, right? Again, many of you might be doing, yeah, I know. Think about this. Do not be diminished by what you don't do, by what you're not called to do. It doesn't concern you. Okay, 4 qualities for vocational integrity, something to think about when you're moving in your vocation, once you feel like you've got it and you're starting to move forward, right? Yes, thank you for the verse there, Doc Michael. Doc, you got it right. Good job, thank you. So 4 qualities from that book, page 111, excellence, truth, diligence, and generosity. And then they, interestingly enough, add Sabbath as a 5th that stands alone. And they are not TO, but seem like they might start going that way. Yeah, unless you're bearing your talent. Good point, Karina. So excellence, truth, diligence, and generosity. Each of these 4 can be embraced to a fault, which is something I love to talk about. Vicky and I have talked about this before. You can take something that is good and abuse it, right? And I know all of us know that internally, and we know that. We're not little, but that's not the point. Right now, we're thinking about this, and we're applying this to our vocations and walks. If you feel like you've had it and you're starting to walk in it, and you're not the person who feels like you need to discern what it is, okay. So, excellence, truth, diligence, and generosity. Are you walking in excellence in your vocation, or are you striving for perfectionism? Not the same thing. One is going to cause problems, the other one is not. It is good to strive for excellence. It is not good to strive for perfectionism, right? I mean, obviously, I didn't really have to clarify that. I'm sorry. I'm not looking down. I'm not trying to dumb down. I'm trying to make sure that what I'm saying is articulated to a point where it is comprehended, and that is not about you, but about me and how I'm verbalizing it. Sometimes I say things and it doesn't come out right, or maybe you'll receive it differently. I just don't want you to think that I think whatever. You sing along with the bagpipes. Nobody's going to hear you if you sing along with my bagpipes unless it's shuttle pipes. The shuttle pipes, they'll hear you sing. but it's usually Karina that I'm trying to get to sing. Okay. Is it truth or bigotry? Is it diligence within your vocation and calling? Or is it hectic activity? Are you just keeping yourself busy, convincing yourself that it's diligence, right? Because there is such a thing as due diligence, right? Remember, we talked earlier about the fruits in due season. A word, a piece of meat in due season. Multiple verses on this, right? So if you're just going about throwing your puzzle piece without even knowing if that's what you're supposed to be doing at that moment or how you're supposed to be going about it, then are you being diligent with your gift? Are you being a good steward of your gift, or are you just being hectic? You know, and if it's time to just sit and still, my goodness, take the break, because when he wants you to go, it's time to go, right? Okay. Even generosity can be misguided. That's not something that I think is commonly talked about or even always applicable, but it is for some, and therefore important, and probably applicable to us all to some degree here and there, right? But to some more so. Generosity versus misguided generosity. You can mean well, but if it's not of the Father, you might be hurting when trying to be helpful. You might be encouraging somebody when what they actually need is to not be encouraged. What? Somebody doesn't need to be encouraged? Why would you say that? Well, because if what they are doing they think is of the Father, but it's not, encouraging them and giving them confirmations and affirmations when you don't know that's of the Father, then you are encouraging them to continue in a direction that they believe is of the Father, and the Father has something else in mind for them. This is something Vicky, Joy, and I have talked about doing a video on. We really want to talk about false corrections and false securities, telling people, I know you are saved, but you didn't actually hear that from the Father. And what if they are not? What if they do not have the indwelling? What if they don't actually have a full personal relationship with the Father? What if they believe him, they believe about him, and they think they're in it and they're close? They know about God, but they don't actually know personally, and they're missing out on some things because they're not aware that that's really an option, and they think that's just how you experience it, or that's just how you talk about it, but they can have that too. And they're missing that. And you telling them you know they're saved, when in truth they might not be, even though you don't think that's the case, could be strongly hurting them. If somebody thinks they have the indwelling, if somebody thinks they have a relationship with the Father and they do not, what they probably need, maybe not in that moment that you're talking to them, maybe the Father's not going to tell you, but one of the heaviest things they might need right then and there is obviously to come to terms with that and get in alignment with the Father and get to know him. If you know you have the indwelling and you know you have a relationship with the Father, I want you to imagine for just half a second that right before you got your relationship, right before that actually started, right before you got aligned, born again, indwelling, however you want to term it, however fits for you, imagine somebody else had came up before that moment and said that you were good and said something that made you feel like is a confirmation, and actually, didn't make you seek the Father right before you actually receive that indwelling. I'm not saying that someone's going to be able to keep you from the Father. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we should be careful with what we say. We should be careful with encouraging. Not that we shouldn't encourage, but internally in the moment, when you go to say something to somebody, listen for the Spirit. If the Spirit tells you, hey, no, don't say that, instead of wondering and getting all hopped up about it right then and there, just don't say it. Okay, I'm going to let you guys go here soon because I've been on here way longer than I expected. Okay, yeah, something I mentioned in one of my old videos. Man, the old video had some really deep stuff in here that I didn't really get to go into tonight, but same can be said vice versa. Okay, so a puzzle piece. Oh, wrong side. Darn it. A puzzle piece by itself can be abused in zealousness due to the lack of seeing and comprehending the borders and limitations thereof. This is something I said in a roundabout way in another video that I was watching, and I was like, man, that was awesome. When it is true and it isn't, thus a need for pieces to be brought together. Okay, so yeah, if you have a puzzle piece and you're not matching it with others, if you're not coming to the community, you're not trying to fit it in with other people's pieces, then you could very easily abuse it, not to the point where you don't even realize what shape it is anymore, because it's not connecting with things that you're trying to connect it with. So then you start, have you ever tried to put a jigsaw puzzle together and you're like, man, these pieces, they have to go together. And you're like, man, they just put, and you get the bent the corner and you're like, there, that darn puzzle piece, right? And then you get like halfway through the puzzle and you're like, oh, okay, so even though the blue line goes through both the pieces and it looks like it connects, this is a shoelace and this is a ribbon, to far ends parts of the puzzle, right? But when you have community, you can try to shove that piece into another piece, and somebody comes up and says, I think it connects with this piece. And you go, yeah. And then somebody else comes up and goes, I think that goes with this piece. Yeah. But you get it enough, you might be like, man, I'm fly swatting away the same thing. Maybe the Father is trying to get me to put pieces. Okay, Father, I don't think that this guy talking about cosmology has anything worth really bringing to the table about the Bible and truth, but if it's possibly put together, what do you got? It could open doors. It could change things for you. I use that example because that's a puzzle piece that is either sometimes abused or rejected and neglected. That is a puzzle piece that is, it's an interesting puzzle piece. I'll put it that way. Okay, so yeah, I had other stuff I wanted to go into, but even the people in the chat who are still here are saying, my goodness. So I get it. I'll let you guys go. Real quick, some books, right, to consider for this topic. Introduction to Myers-Briggs Type, looking at type and learning styles, which helps you with psychological, personal, and the cool thing about these is like, without a relationship with the Father, you look at these and you're like, man, okay, now I have the answer, or no, this is way wrong, right? But when you have a relationship with the Father, you can pick out the truth through the lens of the Father, through his viewpoint, and you don't have to be confined to these. You don't have to be confined to the labels and say, well, I'm an INTJ, so I'm not going to. Upside down, they weren't upside down. What are you talking about upside down? She's silly. But anyways, you get the point, right? The Father can use materials like that to where you're not going to be confined to those and stuck in. When I first came across those, I was like, this is for psychology students who don't know the Father. I don't need that. And then the Father was showing me stuff, and he's like, hey, not every word on here, but man, if you were to listen, you would understand why some people are not able to communicate with you on certain things that you're trying to communicate, because that's not how they learn. That's not their personality. But if you were to listen to me when I told you to not use that wording, but to say this for so-and-so, they would have actually caught on to it. Again, back to the whole heeding the Spirit and listening to him on what to say, how to say, when to say it. It's from experience, because I've messed that up plenty. Okay, courage and calling. Gordon T. Smith. Okay, I'm going to let you guys go. I actually got to do some of my notes. Got to kind of touch a little bit on scripture, personal experiences and stuff like that. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you gained from it, or I hope the Father used this moment, this video, to edify you, to encourage you, to get you to feel like, you know what, I do have some things to offer, because God gave it to me as a gift, as a talent. And he wants to see me use these gifts and talents he gave me. He does not want me to bury them. He wants me to use them. And he doesn't want me to look at others and say, well, so-and-so is using them in a way that I think is more spectacular. Because it doesn't matter what I think. It's about what the Father sees. Those of you who have children, you know what I'm talking about, right? You watch your children, they're gifted differently. And yeah, okay, maybe there's a favorite. That does happen often. It's not the point. But you still appreciate, right? If you can apply this. If don't tell me. I don't want to know. But you can appreciate what is gifted in them, and you enjoy seeing that in them. And maybe you've seen other people with those gifts and talents that the world enjoys better, but yours is from your child. That's how the Father feels about you. It doesn't matter what I think of your work, what Joe Schmo thinks of your work, what some other amazing speaker thinks of your work. It doesn't matter what the troll online says, or your best friend or your family. I mean, it's good to hear the good things, but you know, at the end of the day, this is about glorifying the Father. This is about pleasing the Father. This is about doing what He called you to do. And when He calls you to do it, it's not just about pleasing Him. He has His reasons. Yeah, He enjoys it, but it's for the body and for His glorification. I mean, it has ripple effects. He's a God of profit. So I want to encourage you guys tonight to come together. Ask the Father, what part of the wall do you want me to build? How do you want me to go about doing that? Who do you want me to work with? What gifts have you given me? Did you give me a shovel for putting the speckle between the bricks? Or am I supposed to carry the wheelbarrow? What do you want me to do? Okay, because you guys have something to offer, whether you see it or not. Please, please, please input in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you later on think of this video and came to some realization of your gifts and callings and vocations, I want to hear about it. I'd love to see it in the comments in this video, but if you don't want to do that for some reason and you want to get a hold of me some other way, I still want to hear about them. I want to hear about these things. I want the body to start coming together. I want you to operate in your gifts and talents and help me see what I'm supposed to, where my gifts and talents are, where the Father's being effective through me. Okay, I've repeated it enough. I'm going to do the outro. Good night to you all. Good day to anybody who's watching this during the daytime. I love you, but not as much as the Father. He loves you most. Yeah, any questions, comments, concerns, input, thoughts, what have you, please in the comments. Let's do the outro. Much love to you. Shalom, shalom. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. He's alive. It's really just that simple, man. Draw nigh to God, man. Yeah. Draw nigh to God, He will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, He will draw nigh unto you.